Every weekend I cherished the tranquility of my backyard, a private haven where I nurtured my garden, enjoyed quiet moments with my family, and escaped the hustle of everyday life. But one ordinary afternoon, that sanctuary turned into a battleground. Out of nowhere, the HOA president, notorious for her overbearing demands, showed up at my door with an unbelievable proposition: let her club use my backyard for events. At first, I thought it was a misguided attempt to enhance community spirit, yet as she rattled off her rehearsed spiel about improving neighborhood aesthetics and bringing people together, something about her tone felt chillingly personal. I refused, stating firmly that my backyard was private property, not a public venue for her club's convenience. That very moment, everything shifted. Her calm, authoritative facade shattered, replaced by an eruption of fury that was as unexpected as it was intense. I watched in astonishment as she went berserk, her face contorting with anger, and her voice rising to a level that sent shockwaves through the quiet air. It wasn't just a simple rejection. It was a spark that ignited a conflict, revealing a deep-seated need to control every inch of what she considered community space. Why would someone lose their composure over a backyard? What hidden agenda or sense of entitlement could drive such an extreme reaction? As I stood there, heart pounding and recording every heated word on my phone, I realized that this confrontation was only the opening act of something much bigger. Her outburst hinted at a systematic abuse of power, an effort to force everyone into a homogenized order where personal freedom is sacrificed at the altar of community standards. This isn't merely a story about a rejected club venue request. It's a glimpse into a battle for control, privacy, and the right to live life on your own terms. What lies beneath this explosive reaction, and how far will the HOA go to enforce its arbitrary rules? Stay tuned, because the events that follow will expose not just the absurdity of the demand, but a much larger struggle against an overreaching system that wants to dictate every aspect of our lives. The day after that explosive confrontation, I woke up with a mix of exhilaration and a hint of apprehension, knowing that my firm refusal had not only rattled the HOA president, but had set off a chain reaction. I stepped outside onto my porch, still feeling the adrenaline of that heated moment. My backyard, usually a haven of peace, suddenly felt like the front line of a personal war. I discovered that, overnight, a freshly printed notice had been slipped under my door. The document, embossed with the HOA's official seal, was an unequivocal declaration that my backyard was now in non-compliance with community event standards. Its cold, legal jargon demanded immediate modifications to my property. I couldn't help but feel that this was a direct response to my defiant no. I spent the morning scrutinizing every word on that notice. The language was designed to intimidate. Phrases like mandatory compliance and immediate remedial action jumped off the page, suggesting severe consequences for any non-conformity. I snapped several photos with my phone, saving the images to my digital dossier. As I looked out over the familiar expanse of my yard, I noticed something else that made my blood boil. A section of the grass near the patio had been mowed into an oddly geometric pattern. It was as if someone had decided that my natural, unstructured lawn needed to be upgraded to fit some imaginary standard. Later that day, I recalled a peculiar incident from the previous week. I had caught a glimpse of an HOA inspector lurking by the fence line, clipboard in hand, methodically measuring my property as if he were preparing to enforce a new zoning law. His cold, impassive expression and precise, almost robotic note-taking sent a chill down my spine. I had dismissed it at the time as a routine check, but in light of the new notice and the forced upgrades to my lawn, it suddenly took on a more sinister tone. Was this all part of a systematic effort to transform my backyard into a showcase for their club events? Determined to get to the bottom of this, I began reaching out to neighbors. I made a few calls and discovered that several other homeowners in our community had received similar notices, each one demanding alterations to their private properties under the guise of community benefit. One neighbor, who preferred to remain anonymous, confided that she'd been told to redecorate her front yard to better align with the HOA's aesthetic vision. It quickly became apparent that this wasn't an isolated attack on my property, it was a coordinated campaign. Frustration turned to resolve. I immediately set up my camera on a tripod in a discreet spot in my backyard, aiming it toward the area where the strange mowing had occurred. I wanted clear evidence of any unauthorized modifications. Over the course of the afternoon, I recorded time-lapse footage of the natural play of light and shadows on my lawn, a stark contrast to the rigid, artificial lines imposed by the HOA. I knew that when I shared this footage, it would speak volumes about how their so-called community standards were nothing more than a forced transformation of our cherished individuality. Around mid-afternoon, I received an unexpected phone call from the HOA president herself. Her tone was urgent, and I could almost sense that she was desperate to salvage her plan. "You need to understand that allowing your backyard to remain as it is detrimental to the community's image," she argued, almost pleading. I listened, trying to maintain my composure as she listed a series of reasons that bordered on the absurd, ranging from traffic flow optimization to neighborhood branding. I interrupted her firmly. "My backyard isn't a showcase for your club events. It's my private space, and I have no intention of changing it for anyone's benefit but my own." Her voice turned harsh. "Till you leave me no choice," she snapped, promising that she'd take further action if I didn't comply. That call, brief yet searing, left me with more questions than answers. What extreme measures would she and the HOA be willing to take next? How far would they go to enforce these arbitrary rules? The open loop of her threat hung in the air, and I knew that this confrontation was only the beginning of a larger, escalating battle. As evening settled and I sat on my porch reviewing the day's collected evidence, I couldn't shake the feeling that my once peaceful backyard was now the epicenter of a full-blown turf war. The notices, the suspicious mowing, the hostile phone call, they were all pieces of a puzzle that promised to unravel into a dramatic showdown over my very right to live freely on my own property. Over the next several days, the HOA's tactics escalated far beyond mere notices and hostile phone calls. It seemed that every time I turned around, there was a new attempt to force my backyard into their twisted vision of community improvement. One morning, I awoke to find a series of freshly painted, bright white lines drawn across my lawn, lines that segmented my backyard into artificial zones that the HOA claimed were necessary for proper event organization. The sight of these stark geometric markings on my otherwise natural space ignited a deep, simmering anger in me. I snapped several photos and recorded a video, capturing the jarring contrast between my organic, untamed garden and these invasive, imposed boundaries. As the day wore on, I began receiving a barrage of new messages on my phone. One text, blunt and menacing, read, "Change your property immediately or suffer the consequences." Another message warned, "Your non-compliance will result in fines and legal action." These weren't the polite reminders of a well-meaning community board. They were explicit threats meant to intimidate. I forwarded these messages to my attorney and saved every screenshot, knowing that they would be crucial evidence if this matter ever went to court. That afternoon, while reviewing security footage from the previous night, I noticed something even more alarming. In one clip, taken at the dim light of early morning, I saw a figure in a dark hoodie creeping around the edge of my property. The person was moving with purpose, pausing briefly at the spot where the new white lines had been painted. I rewound the footage multiple times, trying to catch a glimpse of a face, but the figure remained an indistinct shadow. This stealthy act was clearly designed to unsettle me, a covert warning that I was being watched and that the HOA's reach extended well beyond official notices. By evening, the escalation was undeniable. I received an unexpected phone call from a neighbor who described witnessing a group of individuals in uniform standing near his driveway as dusk fell. They were seen discussing something in hushed, urgent tones before quickly dispersing in a black sedan. The neighbor's voice trembled as he recounted the encounter, saying, "I've never seen anything like it before. They seem to be monitoring every inch of our properties." This confirmation from another homeowner fueled my determination and made it clear that this wasn't just an isolated campaign against my backyard. It was a coordinated effort targeting several independent homeowners in our community. As tensions mounted, I decided to ramp up my own countermeasures. I installed additional outdoor cameras with infrared capabilities, ensuring that every inch of my property was under constant surveillance. I also began to leave a logbook outside my door to record any unusual activity as soon as it was observed. Every new act of vandalism or any cryptic message became a new entry in that log, a testament to the relentless pressure being applied. In an effort to unite the community further, I organized an impromptu meeting on my front lawn that evening. Neighbors, already fed up with the creeping tyranny of the HOA, gathered under the glow of a few hastily arranged lanterns, over cups of strong coffee, and amid a mix of nervous energy and shared indignation, we swapped stories about similar incidents, the mysterious white lines, threatening texts, and even strange vehicles parked silently in the dead of night. The room buzzed with a mix of fear and defiance as we realized that our privacy and freedom were being attacked on multiple fronts. That evening, I also recorded a live stream video where I addressed my viewers directly. With a blend of sarcasm and raw determination, I explained how the HOA had not only imposed their ludicrous demands, but had escalated their tactics to levels that bordered on intimidation. They think that by drawing lines on my lawn and sending threats, they can force me into submission, I declared. Well, guess what? I'm not backing down, and neither are any of you. The video quickly gained traction online, with comments flooding in from others who had experienced similar harassment. The solidarity and support I received online was both heartening and a stark reminder that this was a battle for all of us who valued our independence. By the end of the day, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast long shadows across my property, I sat on my porch reflecting on the day's events. The white lines on my lawn, the threatening messages, and the eerie security footage had all added up to a clear message. The HOA was determined to reshape our properties to fit their vision, no matter what. But with every new act of intimidation, my resolve only hardened. I vowed that I would document every incident, fight every threat, and ultimately expose this campaign of coercion for what it was, a blatant abuse of power. I closed my eyes that night with a burning question lingering in my mind. What would the HOA do next? And more importantly, how far would they go to enforce their absurd rules? The escalation had just begun, and I was ready to meet every challenge head-on. Just when I thought the battle was solely about a stubborn refusal to lend my backyard for club events, an unexpected twist emerged that completely upended the narrative. One afternoon, while reviewing the evidence I'd collected, photos of unauthorized notices, security footage of the HOA president's furious outburst, and screenshots of her threatening texts, I discovered a confidential email thread accidentally sent to me by one of the HOA board members. The email was terse and clinical, but its contents were explosive. It revealed that the HOA president's relentless demands were not driven by a genuine concern for community aesthetics at all. Instead, she was following secret orders from a powerful developer with vested interests in the neighborhood. The developer's plan was to pressure homeowners into converting their private spaces into venues for community events, thereby increasing the appeal and market value of the surrounding properties. In exchange, the developer promised hefty kickbacks to the HOA board, a scheme that would ultimately force independent homeowners to relinquish control over their own properties. My heart raced as I read line after line of the email. Phrases like, "We must secure the ideal venue by any means necessary," and "non-compliant properties will be flagged for immediate conversion," jumped out in stark, unyielding terms. The memo painted a picture of a premeditated power grab. The HOA president, whose face had contorted in fury when I refused her request, was merely the front for a far more sinister operation aimed at turning our neighborhood into a profit-driven, homogenized community. I immediately forwarded the email to my attorney, Dan, whose confirmation of its authenticity only solidified the gravity of the situation. "This is the smoking gun," he said during our hurried call. "It proves that the battle you're fighting isn't just about one backyard. It's about a coordinated effort to strip homeowners of their private property rights for the sake of corporate profit." Armed with this revelation, I updated my digital dossier and crafted a detailed timeline that now included this damning correspondence. I also recorded a quick video log explaining how the HOA's aggressive tactics were part of a larger conspiracy. I urged my fellow homeowners to stay vigilant, hinting that this was only the beginning of a fight against a corrupt system. As I sat back, absorbing the full weight of the discovery, one thought became crystal clear. My refusal had inadvertently exposed a massive betrayal that went far beyond personal defiance. The HOA's actions were not random. They were part of a calculated scheme orchestrated by powerful external forces. And now, with this explosive twist in hand, I was more determined than ever to take this battle to every level, exposing the truth and reclaiming the right to live free on my own property. The explosive revelation left me reeling, but it also ignited a steely determination to fight back harder than ever. After reading that damning email, I knew that my battle was no longer just a personal spat over a backyard. It had morphed into a full-blown crusade against a system designed to strip independent homeowners of their rights. My first instinct was to secure every shred of evidence. I spent hours meticulously organizing my digital dossier, backing up every photo, video, and document on multiple encrypted drives. I even set up an encrypted cloud folder that no one could tamper with. This wasn't just about self-preservation. It was about building an unassailable case against the corrupt forces at work. Emotionally, I oscillated between anger, disbelief, and a fierce resolve. I took some time off to clear my head, spending early mornings in solitude on my porch, where the quiet allowed me to process the betrayal. I started journaling every thought and emotion, channeling my frustration into words that later would fuel my public narrative. "They want to turn our neighborhoods into profit machines," I wrote in one entry, "but I'm not going to let them steal our freedom with their manufactured rules." Determined to strengthen my position, I immediately contacted my attorney, Dan. Over a marathon call, we strategized how to incorporate this new evidence into our legal filings. Dan's calm and analytical approach gave me a sense of control amid the chaos. "This memo is the linchpin of our case," he assured me. "We'll use it to expose their collusion and show that their demands are driven purely by profit motives." His confidence further bolstered my resolve. I also reached out to my online community and local neighbors. I organized a virtual meeting to share the shocking details and encourage others to document similar encounters. The response was overwhelming. Many independent homeowners had experienced subtle forms of intimidation, and now, armed with our collective evidence, we felt invincible. I updated my blog and social media with a detailed timeline, emphasizing that this wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a coordinated scheme. In adapting to this new reality, I revamped my public messaging. I recorded fresh video diaries explaining the twist in clear, unfiltered language, blending sarcasm with raw emotion. "They think they can control us with petty rules and hidden agendas," I declared on camera. "Well, I'm here to prove that your tactics have no place on my property or in my life. Every step I took, from tightening digital security to rallying my community, reinforced one unwavering truth. I refuse to be bullied into submission." With the evidence now more explosive than ever, I was ready to take this fight to every level, exposing the HOA's true colors and reclaiming my personal space once and for all. After uncovering that explosive email revealing the HOA president's secret orders from a powerful developer, I knew I couldn't simply sit back and take it. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks, and I realized I needed to adapt quickly, not just to protect my rights, but to turn their own tactics against them. First, I fortified my digital defenses. I immediately backed up every piece of evidence, photos, videos, internal emails, and even those threatening texts, onto a secure cloud storage service and multiple external drives. I created a meticulously organized digital dossier that could not be tampered with, ensuring that every time-stamped file would serve as irrefutable proof of the HOA's overreach. Emotionally, I was a whirlwind of anger, determination, and a lingering dose of apprehension. I spent countless nights in front of my computer, rewatching every clip and rereading every email. Each piece of evidence fueled my resolve, transforming my initial shock into a burning desire to fight back even harder. I began recording video diaries, candidly sharing my frustration and outlining my next moves. In these raw, unedited videos, I declared that my backyard, and my right to enjoy it as I pleased, was non-negotiable. Knowing that I wasn't alone in this battle, I reached out to my neighbors. I organized small, informal gatherings on my property where we exchanged stories of harassment and shared evidence of similar abuses. The solidarity was palpable. It turned out that several independent homeowners had experienced the same arbitrary demands from the HOA. Their courage and support boosted my confidence, and together, we started a community watch group to monitor any further intrusions. I also revamped my public messaging. I updated my website with a detailed timeline of events, clearly mapping out how the HOA's tactics had escalated from petty demands to a coordinated campaign of intimidation. I posted blog entries that not only documented the factual sequence, but also conveyed the emotional toll this struggle had taken on me and my neighbors. My social media channels buzzed with supportive comments and shared stories, creating a small but resilient network of voices demanding accountability. Sitting on my porch one cool evening, I surveyed my property with a renewed sense of vigilance. The internal memo and the subsequent chain of events had transformed my personal dispute into a battle for community rights. I knew that each step I took, from tightening my security to rallying my neighbors, was a declaration of independence. Yet as I pondered what the HOA might do next, a chilling thought lingered. Their tactics were escalating, and I had to be ready for the next move in this high-stakes showdown. Just when I thought the HOA's bullying was limited to my backyard, new challenges began to emerge that expanded the battleground in unexpected ways. One morning, as I was sipping my coffee on the porch, I found an envelope taped to my door. Unlike the official notices I'd received, this flyer was crudely printed and bore a handwritten message: "Your backyard is just the beginning. Prepare for the rest." The ominous note wasn't signed, but its tone left no doubt that the intimidation was escalating. I soon discovered that I wasn't the only one targeted. A close neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, called me in a panic. He explained that the HOA had visited his property late last night and insisted that his front yard be remodeled to match a standardized look. Mr. Jenkins, a longtime resident with a stubborn streak, recounted how the inspectors measured every inch of his yard and left behind a detailed list of required modifications. It seemed that the HOA was enforcing a uniform aesthetic, not just on my property, but across the entire community. Later that day, while reviewing my growing dossier of evidence, I received a series of threatening text messages from an unknown number. One message read, "If you don't cooperate, we'll make sure you regret it." These messages were a stark escalation from the previous official warnings. I saved every screenshot, knowing that this harassment was turning personal. Adding to the chaos, I caught a glimpse on my security camera of a black van idling near my property late at night. Although I couldn't make out the faces inside, the van's presence was a clear indication that the HOA was stepping up their surveillance efforts. I later heard rumors on a local online forum that a compliance team had been dispatched to several homes in the neighborhood, a move that suggested this was no longer just about using my backyard for club events, but part of a coordinated campaign of intimidation targeting independent homeowners. Amid these developments, I received an email from an ex-HOA board member who had grown disillusioned with the increasingly aggressive tactics. The message detailed that there was an internal faction within the HOA quietly opposed to these over-the-top measures, and that more moderate board members were urging for transparency. Although the email was anonymous, it offered a glimmer of hope and hinted that not all was lost from within the system. Each of these new incidents, the handwritten flyer, Mr. Jenkins's alarming story, the threatening texts, and the mysterious van added layers to an already convoluted battle. It was becoming clear that the HOA's actions were part of a systematic strategy to enforce conformity and control independent property owners by any means necessary. Every new piece of evidence fueled my determination to document and expose these tactics. As the intimidation tactics escalated, the emotional toll on me began to show in unexpected ways. Late one night, I sat in my study surrounded by my organized dossier, photos, text messages, security footage, and I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of isolation. Every new threat, every menacing note reminded me that this wasn't just about a backyard. It was a personal assault on my right to live freely. I found myself haunted by the memory of that furious exchange with the HOA president, a moment when her rage was so raw, it left me questioning whether I could ever truly feel safe on my own property again. The following day, I received an unexpected call from a neighbor I'd rarely spoken to before. Mrs. Lopez, a kind woman known for her gentle nature. Her voice trembled as she recounted that she had also received a cryptic warning similar to mine. "I'm scared," she admitted, and in that vulnerable confession I found a mirror of my own anxiety. We talked at length about the mounting pressure and the emotional drain of living under constant threat. It was both comforting and disheartening to learn that I wasn't alone. Many in our community were silently suffering, their lives disrupted by the HOA's relentless overreach. Later that week, during a community meeting at a local coffee shop, emotions ran high. As several homeowners shared their stories, accounts of mysterious vans, aggressive inspectors, and invasive notes, the room filled with a collective tension that was almost palpable. One man, voice shaking with both anger and fear, declared that he had felt watched every time he stepped outside. His words resonated deeply with me, stirring a mix of fury and sorrow. It wasn't just about a backyard anymore. It was about the erosion of our personal spaces and our peace of mind. I began to record my thoughts in a video diary, my tone raw and unfiltered as I admitted, "There are nights when every sound outside makes me jump. Every shadow feels like a threat. I'm not just defending my property, I'm defending my sanity." The vulnerability in that moment was both painful and cathartic, and when I later shared the video online, the flood of supportive comments reminded me that our collective struggle was real. Even as I fortified my defenses and rallied neighbors, the emotional weight of the situation sometimes left me exhausted. Yet, each time I saw a supportive message or heard a reassuring word from a fellow homeowner, it renewed my determination. The constant interplay between fear and hope became the fuel that kept me pushing forward, an emotional roller coaster that, despite its highs and lows, reminded me that I was fighting not just for myself, but for every independent soul whose right to privacy was being threatened. Just when I thought I had a grip on the escalating conflict, a series of unexpected events sent the tension skyrocketing to new heights. One morning, as I stepped outside to survey my backyard, a place that had become a symbol of my defiance, I noticed something alarming. Fresh, unmistakable tire tracks crisscrossed my lawn, leading directly to the area where I had spent countless peaceful hours. At first, I assumed it was just an errant visit from a neighbor, but the tracks were too deliberate, too patterned. It felt as if someone had driven repeatedly over my property, marking it with their intrusion. Not long after, I discovered that a set of new, crudely drawn signs had been staked into the ground at the edge of my yard. The signs, hand-painted in bold, aggressive strokes, read, "Club events only and your backyard our venue." Their presence was a clear and personal provocation, designed to assert the HOA's control in an overt, almost vandalistic manner. I immediately took photos and recorded a short video, the evidence burning with every detail of the defacement. That same afternoon, my phone buzzed with a flurry of messages from unknown numbers. One message was especially chilling. "Next time, we won't just leave a note." The text was accompanied by a blurry image of what appeared to be a shadowy figure standing at my fence. The timing was uncanny. The message arrived mere minutes after I discovered the signs. It was as if the threat was now moving from paper and paint to something far more sinister. As dusk approached, the atmosphere around my property grew even more unsettling. My newly installed cameras, which I had hoped would offer some peace of mind, captured a brief clip of a group of individuals in dark clothing quietly gathering near my back door. They were clearly in a hurry, glancing around before dispersing into the shadows. I rewound the footage repeatedly, trying to extract any clue about their identities, but all I got was the unsettling feeling that I was being watched from every angle. Later that evening, while reviewing all the new evidence, I noticed that the patterns of these events began to intertwine. The tire tracks, the hand-painted signs, the threatening texts, and the shadowy figures. Each piece was a part of a larger, coordinated campaign. It wasn't just about a club event anymore. It was a full-scale intimidation tactic aimed at asserting dominance over my private space. The escalation left me both enraged and more determined than ever to fight back. Every new act of vandalism and every cryptic message added fuel to my resolve. I updated my digital dossier with the latest photos, videos, and messages, knowing that these surprises would be crucial in exposing the HOA's relentless harassment. With my defenses bolstered and my community of fellow homeowners growing stronger, I braced myself for whatever extreme measures they would attempt next. As the days turned into a whirlwind of threats and defiant responses, I began to notice that the battle was far more complex than a simple dispute over backyard usage. One late evening, while meticulously reviewing my growing dossier of evidence, photos of aggressive notices, videos of the HOA president's enraged outburst, and copies of those ominous text messages, I stumbled upon a series of internal memos and leaked emails that completely changed the scope of the conflict. It started with a cryptic email forwarded anonymously by someone claiming to be a disillusioned board member of the HOA. The subject line read, "The real agenda behind our community standards." My heart pounded as I opened the attachment. In it, I found detailed discussions among board members about transforming not just my property, but several independent homes into uniform event spaces designed to enhance the neighborhood's market appeal. According to the memo, The HOA president was under direct pressure from a local developer with significant financial interests in converting private properties into communal venues. The language was chillingly pragmatic. We must secure suitable sites for public events to raise property values. Non-compliant properties will be targeted for forced conversion if necessary. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It was as if the HOA's petty demands were just the tip of an iceberg, a carefully orchestrated plan to reshape the entire community for profit. My backyard, once a symbol of my hard-earned freedom, was now a pawn in a grand scheme designed to strip independent homeowners of their personal spaces. I immediately forwarded the email to my attorney, Dan, who confirmed its authenticity after a brief consultation. "This," he said gravely, "is the smoking gun. It proves that your battle is part of a larger, profit-driven conspiracy." As I digested this explosive revelation, I began connecting the dots between various incidents. I recalled the strange, geometrically mowed sections of my lawn that had appeared seemingly overnight. At the time, I had dismissed them as random acts of vandalism or misguided attempts at improvement. Now, however, I realized they were deliberate modifications, subtle markers meant to visually segment my property in line with the developer's vision. These patterns weren't accidental. They were calculated efforts to reshape my backyard into a format that suited a mass event space. Not long after, I received another anonymous message via text. This one was more direct. "Your property is next. Compliance is not optional." Alongside this message, a series of blurry images showed a van parked at the edge of another homeowner's yard, images that I later learned were from properties across the neighborhood undergoing similar improvements. It became clear that the HOA's intimidation campaign was systematic, targeting multiple properties with the same objective, forcing homeowners to concede control of their personal spaces. Eager to understand the full extent of the conspiracy, I reached out to a few trusted neighbors. In hushed tones over phone calls and private messages, several independent homeowners revealed that they had received similar notices and even encountered unannounced visits by inspectors who measured their yards with precision instruments. One neighbor, Mr. Carter, confided, "I got a notice telling me my front yard doesn't meet the community aesthetic standards. I'm not even in the HOA, but they're treating my property as if it's part of some larger plan." His story resonated with me, reinforcing that the HOA's actions were not isolated. This was a coordinated assault on our autonomy. I also managed to obtain a copy of the minutes from a closed HOA board meeting through an anonymous source. The minutes, once deciphered, revealed heated debates among board members. Some argued that enforcing these standards was necessary to increase neighborhood property values, while others expressed concerns about overstepping legal boundaries. One particularly damning excerpt read, "If homeowners do not voluntarily comply, we will be forced to initiate legal proceedings to enforce conversion, thereby transforming their private backyards into public event spaces." The cold efficiency of those words sent a shiver down my spine. Compiling all this new evidence, I updated my digital timeline on my website, interlinking the internal memos, the mode patterns, the threatening texts, and the minutes from the board meeting. The narrative that emerged was undeniable. The HOA's demands were not about community benefit. They were part of a calculated strategy to force independent homeowners into a mold that maximized profit for external developers. I recorded a video log that night, speaking directly to my online community. They want to homogenize our lives, to force our personal sanctuaries into pre-packaged, profit-driven event spaces, I declared, my voice tinged with both anger and determination. But I'm here to show you that we have the power to resist. Our backyards, our homes are not for sale. The response from viewers was immediate and overwhelming. Comments poured in from neighbors who corroborated my findings, sharing their own evidence and personal experiences. The collective voice of independent homeowners was growing louder, and with every new revelation, our united front became more formidable. By the end of that night, the web of connections was clear, and my resolve was unshakable. The HOA's plan was exposed for what it was: a cynical, profit-driven scheme that had no place in a community built on the principles of freedom and individuality. I knew that this explosive evidence would be the cornerstone of our next legal move and would galvanize every homeowner who had ever felt oppressed by arbitrary rules. The tension that had been simmering for days finally reached its boiling point one chilly evening. When the community's frustration could no longer be contained, I received an urgent call from a group of fed-up neighbors who had organized an emergency town hall meeting to confront the HOA's escalating overreach. With my digital dossier clutched tightly under my arm, I headed to the packed community center, where faces of anger and determination filled the room. As the meeting commenced, the council chair solemnly acknowledged the mounting grievances. Stories of arbitrary notices, defaced lawns, and covert threats that had shaken independent homeowners to their core. Then, all eyes turned to me as I was invited to share my account. I took a deep breath and began recounting my ordeal, starting with the initial confrontation with the HOA president and the subsequent barrage of invasive actions on my property. I laid out the timeline, showing how my refusal to lend my backyard had triggered a cascade of harassment. Every piece of evidence, the threatening flyers, the menacing text messages, and the peculiar alterations to my landscape, was presented on a large screen. As I spoke, the room grew silent, the gravity of my words resonating with everyone present. A local council member interrupted, demanding an explanation for these repeated invasions of our privacy. I pointed to the damning internal emails and leaked memos that revealed the profit-driven motives behind the HOA's demands. "This isn't about community improvement," I declared, my voice steady but laced with fury. "It's about control, forcing us into a mold for someone else's benefit." The confrontation escalated when a representative from the HOA was unexpectedly summoned to the meeting. His face betrayed anxiety as he stammered through a feeble justification for their actions. "We believed these measures would benefit the community," he insisted, but his words were drowned out by the chorus of discontent from the crowd. Murmurs of agreement and shouts of "enough" filled the room as the representative's claims crumbled under the weight of the evidence. In that charged moment, it became clear that the collective voice of independent homeowners had forced the hand of local officials. The council promised an immediate independent investigation into the HOA's practices, declaring that no one would be bullied into submission on their own property. As the meeting adjourned, the energy in the room was electric. This confrontation had not only validated our fight, but also set the stage for decisive action. I left the town hall that night with a mixture of relief and fierce determination. The HOA's overreach had been exposed in front of an entire community, and the promise of accountability hung in the air. Yet, deep down, I knew that this public outcry was only the beginning. The real test would come when the HOA was forced to answer for its actions in court, and I was ready. Following the town hall meeting, I knew the next step was to force a face-to-face showdown with the HOA president and her cronies. Determined to reclaim control over my property, I organized a direct confrontation on my own lawn. I invited a few brave neighbors, local community leaders, and even a mediator recommended by a trusted friend. We gathered on my backyard just as the evening light softened the edges of the day, turning the space into an impromptu arena for our defiance. It wasn't long before the HOA representatives arrived in a sleek, unmarked van. The HOA president, looking visibly agitated yet trying to maintain her composure, stepped forward with a clipboard clutched tightly in hand. "We're here to discuss the non-compliance issues regarding your property," she declared, her tone a mix of rehearsed authority and barely concealed frustration. I wasted no time. Stepping into the center of the circle formed by my neighbors, I addressed her in a calm yet resolute voice. "My backyard is my private sanctuary, and your demands are completely baseless. I will not allow you or anyone to dictate how I manage my property." My words cut through the tense silence, and I could sense the crowd nodding in solidarity. The HOA president tried to argue that her actions were for the greater good, and that my property was, in fact, contributing to a decline in neighborhood aesthetics. I countered sharply. "Aesthetic standards. You're not here to improve a community. You're here to enforce your arbitrary rules for your own profit and convenience." The conversation quickly escalated into a heated exchange, with her repeatedly promising that further action would be taken if I didn't comply. At one point, I laid out a printed copy of the internal memo that revealed her secret orders from a developer, emphasizing, "This is not about community benefit, it's a power grab. I demand an immediate retraction of all your threats and a public apology." The words hung heavy in the air, and I could see a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. A local mediator stepped in to try and calm the situation, urging us to find a resolution. We need clear, enforceable assurances that your property will be respected, I stated firmly. After a tense few minutes, the HOA representatives begrudgingly agreed to review my demands with their board and to provide a formal response within 48 hours. As they departed, I looked around at the gathered neighbors, faces mixed with relief and determination. I knew that this direct confrontation had forced them into a corner. Now, the real test was whether their promised response would be more than empty words. My next steps, and the decisions we would all face in the coming days, would determine the future of our private spaces. That night, the tension on my property reached an almost unbearable climax. I had spent days documenting every petty demand, every threatening notice, every act of vandalism, and now, as dusk fell, I sensed that the HOA was preparing for its final move. I sat on my back porch, my eyes scanning the darkened perimeter through my newly installed cameras, when a sudden flash of headlights startled me. In the distance, a sleek, unmarked vehicle pulled up near the gate. I immediately grabbed my phone and began recording. Within minutes, two figures in dark jackets emerged from the van, their faces obscured by shadows. I watched as they methodically circled my backyard, pausing at the very spot where the HOA had previously imposed its club venue decree. Their silent presence was a direct challenge, a final act meant to intimidate me into submission. Every instinct screamed that this was not just routine enforcement, but a deliberate attempt to deliver the ultimate blow. My heart pounded as I rewound the live footage on my phone, capturing every detail, the deliberate pace of their steps, the careful glances exchanged between them, and the unmistakable air of menace that hung in the cool night air. Then, as if on cue, one of the figures stopped at the edge of the area where the newly painted lines still marred my lawn. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small can of spray paint. My pulse raced as I recorded, realizing that this was their signal to escalate further. I felt a surge of defiance, so I grabbed my portable speaker and played a recorded message, a message in which I boldly declared that my property was not for public use, that I would never allow it to be commandeered for the HOA's arbitrary events. For a few agonizing moments, silence reigned. Then, unexpectedly, a loud shout came from off-camera, a voice that sounded like it belonged to one of my neighbors, joining in solidarity. At that moment, the figures hastily retreated back to their van, and the headlights disappeared into the night. I exhaled slowly, my adrenaline still surging, knowing that I had just witnessed the final act of their intimidation campaign. The evidence was now undeniable. The HOA's tactics had crossed the line from annoying bureaucracy into outright harassment. I knew that this final blow, recorded in crisp detail, would become the centerpiece of my case against them. I quickly saved all the footage and messages, ready to share them with my attorney and the local authorities. As I sat there on my porch under the starry sky, I felt both the weight of the battle and the unyielding spark of rebellion. Tonight had proven one thing: no one can force me to surrender my private sanctuary. The day of reckoning arrived with an almost tangible electricity in the air. I found myself standing before a packed room at the local community center, where a special hearing had been convened by the city council in response to our mounting complaints. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation and defiance, as if every independent homeowner present was ready to reclaim their right to privacy. My evidence dossier lay open on a table before me, brimming with every threatening flyer, text message, and surveillance clip that documented the HOA's relentless intimidation. As the hearing commenced, the council chair took the stage with a grave expression. "We have received disturbing reports from several homeowners regarding unauthorized modifications, aggressive enforcement, and even direct harassment on private properties," he announced. His words set the stage for what was to come. Then it was my turn. I stepped forward, heart pounding, and began to recount the story of my backyard, my sanctuary turned battleground. I spoke with measured conviction, detailing the initial demand from the HOA president, the hostile phone call, and the subsequent barrage of threatening notices. Every word was punctuated by images and video clips projected on the screen behind me. I showed the crisp evidence of the white lines forcibly painted on my lawn, the unsettling tire tracks, and the covert footage of shadowy figures lurking near my property. When I unveiled the internal memo revealing the developer's influence behind the HOA's actions, the room fell into a stunned silence. A murmur of outrage swept through the crowd. I could see local officials nodding in agreement as I concluded. This isn't about community standards. It's about a calculated power grab. They're trying to force us to relinquish our private spaces for their profit-driven agenda. We will not stand for it. At that moment, the HOA representative was called to the stand. His face, once so confident, now betrayed clear anxiety. When he attempted to justify their actions by citing vague community benefits, I interjected sharply, "Your so-called benefits come at the expense of our rights, our privacy, and our very freedom." The tension reached a fever pitch as the council members exchanged looks, and even the representative's voice began to waver. Then, after what felt like an eternity of heated exchanges and mounting evidence, the council chair declared, "Based on the overwhelming proof presented here today, we hereby order an independent investigation into the HOA's practices and demand an immediate cessation of all harassment on private properties." A wave of applause and relieved cheers erupted in the room. In that decisive moment, every threat, every act of intimidation was rendered powerless by the collective will of the community and the clear, undeniable evidence laid bare. Standing there, I felt a profound surge of vindication. The final showdown had not only exposed the HOA's abusive tactics, but had also united every independent homeowner in a resounding stand for personal freedom. The battle was far from over, but in that moment, the oppressive shadow of their tyranny was shattered, and our rights were reclaimed. In the aftermath of that monumental showdown, a profound sense of freedom and vindication settled over our community. I returned home to my backyard, a space once under siege by arbitrary demands and baseless intimidation, with a renewed spirit and an unbreakable resolve. Every step I took on that familiar ground reminded me that my property, my personal sanctuary, had been fiercely defended, and no one had the right to dictate how I live my life. In the days following the public hearing, local media picked up our story, and the narrative of our struggle spread like wildfire throughout the neighborhood. Independent homeowners, many of whom had long felt powerless against the HOA's overreach, began to speak out. We held small gatherings on our porches and at community centers, sharing our experiences and the overwhelming evidence that had united us in defiance. The collective outpouring of support served as a powerful reminder that when we stand together, even the most oppressive systems can be challenged. I continued to update my website and social media channels with detailed accounts of every step of our battle, from the initial demand to the final verdict in the community hearing. Every photograph of defaced property, every screenshot of threatening messages, and every video clip of that fateful confrontation was shared as a testament to our unwavering commitment to our rights. My online forum became a hub of encouragement and solidarity, where independent homeowners exchanged ideas, documented further incidents, and offered mutual support. Looking back, the entire ordeal taught me that our personal spaces are sacred and must be defended against any form of coercion or arbitrary control. The HOA's attempts to force a uniform, profit-driven agenda on our lives have been exposed for what they truly are, a power grab that has no place in a community built on freedom and individuality. Before I sign off, I want to leave you with a simple message. If you've ever faced arbitrary rules, intrusive demands, or any attempt to take away your personal freedom, know that you are not alone. Stand up, document every detail, and fight back. Your property and your right to live freely are non-negotiable. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe, share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below, and join our community of independent homeowners who refuse to be bullied. Together, we can ensure that our voices remain strong and that our personal sanctuaries are never compromised. Thank you for watching, and remember, no one has the power to dictate how you live your life. Stay strong, stay free, and I'll see you in the next video.